3 p.m. is a great time to start. This episode gets hot and heavy and not for the lighthearted. And as they say, if it's too hot in the kitchen, get out. So you have been warned and complaints are not valid. Enter at your own risk. You will have to tune in to find out. Welcome back to the Life of Tash Mia. I'm Tash. Today we're back again with Alex, who we had an episode prior with. She is the dom that trained me. And we talked a little bit about her personal life in a DS dynamic. And today we're actually going to dive a bit deeper and talk more about the scene and the process. So thanks for coming back. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. So as I said, you're a dom in your personal life. And so that kind of means your DS relationship plays out more in the, I say bedroom in inverted commas, because maybe it's in the kitchen sometimes or the dungeon, as opposed to someone who's a lifestyler, which means that they're always in that DS dynamic. So how do you get into play? How does a scene initiate for you?
It's definitely something that we have negotiated prior in how, in the contract I spoke about.
Yep.
It's definitely in there in how we like to play. So for me, Sundays 3 p.m. is when we play.
So do you have like a particular day and time? This is when we play. Is that it's like written down? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I think because it's also a relationship, it's good to have separate times where you can be romantic and then there's times where you are definitely in dom sub DS relationship.
Yeah.
So for us, it works that 3 p.m. on a Sunday that they would meet me in their position, which we've negotiated as to how I like to be greeted in their position in the playroom. And we do have a playroom, to your point. It does have it is set out. So if you have seen 50 Shades of Grey, it is a red room.
It's better than that. Her one is better than the one in 50 Shades of Grey. I can tell you that.
It definitely has more equipment. But yes, I do have a room where we meet and an appropriate way for them to greet me as their dom.
Can I ask what the position is?
So I call it position 1, and basically it is them greeting facing towards the door. So when I walk in, but their head has to be tilted to the ground with eyes to the ground with their hands behind their back and their legs spread.
I always start in position 3, which is on your knees, hands behind your back, like crouching down, like baby pose, but what is it? Baby pose in yoga. Hands behind the back, head right on the ground, and then I put each shoe beside each ear. That's my starting one.
Yeah, I definitely different relationships were, and different times, but that's my general greeting position. My starter scene signal is I always do the collaring. That's kind of, I say to them, collar on, signals start a scene, collar off, signals end a scene. Do you have any other signals you use, or is it just the position to start the scene? How do you end? It's position, but I'm a collarer as well. So a collarer. I like to use a collar to signal both beginning and end of scene as well. Yeah. Cuffs as well. So I don't just collar. I'm about cuffs on hands and ankles as well.
Yeah, I'm a collar cuffer. Do you have a preferred time to play? Like during the day?
As I said, 3 p.m. tends to be my time, and it is actually really strategic for this for a reason, because I said previously in my sessions I can plan a session to go up to 5 hours.
Yeah.
So starting at 3 p.m. allows me to
have time to have breaks in between scenes.
Yeah.
So when I do plan a session that goes for that long, I've actually planned different scenes. It can be in different bedrooms. So I could start in the living room in the swing. I could move up to the playroom. I could end in the bedroom. So depending on what I want to do, there will be different aspects and different rooms that we play in.
Yeah.
So 3 p.m. is a great time to start because break time after a couple of hours play can be dinner.
Yeah.
And then I make them because I also like to be served. And the sub is also consensually a service sub. So it's a nice break to cook dinner and take time to do that and then reintroduce a scene after dinner.
Yeah.
So that's a really nice way to spread out and to enjoy the journey. So you're taking a break and sustenance as well so that everybody's fed and looked after. And then it finishes, around that 8, 9 p.m. And that gives you time to do aftercare, to talk about the session, the scene, what worked, what didn't work, to enjoy each other's time after and before falling asleep.
Yeah. Just going back to the breaks you mentioned, especially because your sub is a servitude sub as well. If he's cooking you dinner, are you actually still kind of in the scene, or it really is like we're breaking scene, it's us, like as a couple, or you're still a little bit in the dynamic?
100% still in the dynamic. So it's more about sustenance and being that we're not actually breaking scene. It is just a break that is away from sexual play.
Yeah, okay.
So it's something that they're going to do to please me still.
Yeah, so you're still kind of in that DS dynamic while you're doing that. It's interesting. I have one client in particular who we do, 4 or 5 hour plays, and we literally like stop play and then have like cups of tea with each other. But we're completely out of the dynamic in that point where we just start chatting, and then we're like, okay, we'll get back into it. So I think that's really interesting, the different ways you can kind of approach that.
Yeah, when I'm doing that, there's no real break in the DS relationship. It is 100%. We are doing this for tonight.
Yeah, this is our 5 hours.
Yeah.
You mentioned a really good point about, making it start in the afternoon, making it start early enough that you've got time to play and then have that aftercare. We've talked a little bit before in the first series about what aftercare is, which is really important. So that's, because there's such a big psychological layer to BDSM play, sub space, that meditative transcendental like space you get into, the dom high where you're kind of like in that flow state and you're super focused and you're super on it. But what comes after that due to, they've done studies about different, hormones, adrenaline, endorphins, or whatever's coming up, you can then get quite a drop afterwards. So that's why, we've always said aftercare is so important in BDSM play. For you, what does aftercare look like?
For me personally, or the aftercare that I give?
Both.
Okay, so for the aftercare for my sub, it looks like as soon as I've released them, so from their cuffs and their collar, it's placing them on the bed or asking them to take a seat. I then have a big glass of water and some chocolate or a lolly or an ice cream. So it's definitely to get that bit of sugar after play because especially after a session of like 5 hours, it can be quite exhausting. Yeah. So you need to make sure that you rejuvenate yourself. So sitting them down and then making sure that they have a water, have some chocolate or something, and then they can go and have a shower, which I find for them is quite relaxing. And that also gives me time to arrange while they're having a shower. I can neaten up the bed or make sure that everything is back to a vanilla scene, for instance, so that they're comfortable to be able to relax And so when they come back into the bedroom, I'm no longer in Mistress clothes. I'm in comfortable clothes. I've laid out their comfortable clothes. And one of the biggest things for me and my aftercare myself is actually doing that process for them.
Yeah.
So I like to tickle. So massage or tickle. So, for instance, after they've had their shower, especially if we've done a rope scene, a bondage scene of some sort, they would have marks on their body, rope kisses. Absolutely. So I would like to, start from their hands and rub down their wrists and work my way over their entire body.
This is giving me tingles.
But to me, that is actually my aftercare.
Yeah.
So me looking after them
Being
and
the nurturer.
making sure that they have that nice soft transition back into seeing me, especially as a relationship, seeing me as their partner as opposed to their dominant is definitely part of my process as well. And then we can talk about the scene, why I'm doing that as well. So if I come across a mark that's particularly red, did that really hurt? Was that comfortable? So you can talk about those sorts of things while you're giving them that massage and, exploring each other's body in a very sexual but relaxing way.
Yeah.
So after an intense scene, it can be sexual, but it can be quite intense. And so this is a relaxing version.
Yeah.
So it will take them back down to
Earth.
Absolutely. So that for me, as I said, aftercare for me is that.
Yeah.
But then you can talk about different things like dom drop and sub drop, dom high, subspace.
Yeah.
So it depends on the situation. If it's been particularly hard for one of us, then that aftercare might have to be adjusted.
Yeah. Does your aftercare always happen straight after the scene? Or do you find that sometimes you'll need aftercare the next day, the next few days? Like, what's your kind of like time length or how long you do it for?
Yeah, look, aftercare goes as long as it needs to go for.
Yeah.
So depending on the effects of that session, depending on the length, the intensity and those sorts of things, generally minimum, I spend about an hour with that relaxation period.
Yeah.
But if it goes into the next day, and obviously I'm not massaging them till the next day, but after sleep, if we've woken up and there's still things that need to be addressed, you need to be comfortable in talking about that, whether it's over the breakfast table with coffee, things like that. So my aftercare can go longer depending on what they need.
Yeah, yeah. What are your preferred tools of the trade and what are your preferred activities when you're doing a scene?
I discussed that I have a playroom.
Yeah.
In my playroom, my trophy is my BDSM bed.
Describe this bed because this is one hell of a bed.
It was custom made and it was from America. So it's not by any means any dollars spared on this. And it was actually a gift from a sub. So it's 300 kilos to start with. So strong metal, very heavy. It's got a cage underneath with access. So if someone's been naughty, you can actually lock them in the cage. It has bars everywhere with anchor points everywhere. So on the top, so think big metal 4-post bed.
And then with bars down all the way down.
Correct. Yeah. Bars all across the top with anchor points on it. So no matter what you're doing, you have a position where you can tie someone.
Because she's the predicament play queen.
Absolutely. It also comes with all the attachments. So it has the St. Andrew's cross. It has a swing attachment. It has stocks. So it was custom designed for my preferences. Yeah. So anything that I wanted to add on there. And one of my biggest things was I need an anchor point no matter where I am.
Yeah.
So whatever I'm doing, it's like they need to be tied there.
They need to be restrained.
They need to be restrained. So that is my big trophy item that I love and I do use in pretty much every scene that I put together. So it might not start there, but it always ends there. And I have a swing. I have a sex machine. So I basically have almost any toy you can think of, but my favorite ones all have to do with predicament bondage. So I absolutely love ropes. I've learnt how to be a rigger and how to safely tie my subs up so that, as I discussed earlier, they're not cutting off circulation points and pressure points and things like that. And the humbler is one of my favorites, actually.
Yes.
And I know that you have a passion for that one as well.
I love a good humbler, the CVT. Love a good CVT session.
Yeah. So, but when it comes to saying what is my favorite, it definitely has to be my custom bed.
Yeah. Just to explain what the humbler is, very hard to explain. It's well, mine's wooden, but I know you can get them in other materials. And it's, what shape would you, kind of a curves, kind of like a very loose W. And in the middle of it is a little hole and a spot for where the balls go into. And you kind of have to get into it front facing, so that they'll get into it while they are standing looking at you. You'll put it around the balls, and then you kind of have to maneuver the item so it goes behind each leg. Now, as it goes behind each thigh, and obviously their balls are being pulled, they are then forced to get into a humble position, which is where you get the name humbler from, and you're on your knees and you're bent over. So just to explain what humbler is and how we got that name.
Yeah, think stocks for your balls.
Stocks for your balls. So what other favourite things would be involved in a scene for you? What's some things that you like to do?
Weights are a big thing that I always include at some point. Swings I like to use because it gets them in prime position for easy access to everything, and you can hang things quite successfully from body parts whilst they're in the swing, and that's comfortable for them but also uncomfortable at the right measure. So I love to incorporate a swing into my sessions as well. I have so many favorites.
Does play always end in sex for you? Is it always a component for you? Because we know some people, I've talked previously, asexual people are a massive part of the BDSM community. So sex isn't part of their practice. 40% of people practice BDSM purely for meditative purposes. But for you, does it always involve sex?
Definitely, if I'm in a relationship, then it generally is part of it.
Yeah.
So, but the last part.
Yeah.
So that part might only be the last 10 minutes of play.
Yeah.
However, I can reach climax through Dom high alone and Dom space.
Yeah.
And my subs in subspace can reach climax as well. So it definitely does not have to be intercourse. It can be through expressions throughout the session that we have both had our release.
Yeah. We've often talked about a scene being like a storyline. You have like a start, a build up to the middle, the kind of like highlight, and then, we come back down to the end. Would you say when it is the sexual practice, is that the highlight, or it is actually like that's the end and then kind of collar comes off?
It depends. It's where the mood takes me.
Yeah.
Really. I think the highest point is subspace, and that doesn't necessarily
have to be the sexual point. Yeah.
It's when your journey's working. It's this might be the most vanilla way to explain this, but as a Dom, I consider myself the driver of a vehicle. In that
you're the leader.
I'm the leader. I'm the one who's trying to get us safely to a destination.
Yeah.
And enjoy the trip as you go.
Yeah.
So that's how I consider my role. And for me, definitely the enjoyment part is for them to, for that destination to have gone correctly and for a safe journey, and that we are all enjoying ourselves, and that doesn't have to end sexually.
Yeah. I love that, the idea of you being the leader, you being the driver, because, you're making sure that it's all happening, and it does take a lot of energy. You're doing like long sessions as well. I do, mainly 1-2 hour sessions with clients, and even that, energetically, it's actually quite a draining thing to do. So when you're going for 5 hours, do you find that your energy sometimes gets drained too much? How do you replenish that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you both need to be hydrated constantly. So I always make sure that we have bottles of water or bottles of energy drink or something in around easy grab. I make sure that a session doesn't go too long without a break. So if I have them tied up, so anyone who is a rigger would know that pressure points and things like that only have a limit of 10 to 20 minutes, depending on how they're tied, as to when you need to take and remove those ropes. So it's a lot of stopping and starting. You can transition very, very nicely into your next play. So taking off the ropes, you can then put on handcuffs, for instance, and you can do that quite smoothly through your session. But making sure that you're reading body language. So they might start breathing heavily, they might be sweating, so you need to remove something that you might not have even reached that 10-minute mark, and you can tell that they're getting uncomfortable. So being able to read that, and without putting an end to the scene, being able to transition into something more comfortable so that you've got longevity, and to, take that journey together without big interruptions, but making sure that on hand you definitely have within reach your water or your energy drink.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point you also brought up about, reading your sub again. They're wriggling, they're uncomfortable. They don't even necessarily need to say a safe word in that instance. And I do believe that it is the responsibility of a dom to read their sub, because so many subs try and push it. And I think that's sometimes when things can go really wrong.
Absolutely. They like to not disappoint you is one of their biggest things. So if they can see that you're enjoying it, but they're uncomfortable, they might be a little reluctant to say this is actually hurting me.
Yeah.
Because they'll see your enjoyment and they'll be like, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. And whilst that can be safely played, the pushing the limits, it depends on what it is, and that you need to. I always prefer to be the dom that is very, very cautious as opposed to pushing it. So I am all about reading my subs' body language, reading their breathing, making sure that they are comfortable, because ultimately we both want to enjoy this experience.
Yeah. And they've put a lot of trust in you to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I really, really pride myself on them not using their safe words and not having to. Because for me, I want to make sure that I've read it before that.
Before they have to get to that point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Can you tell us, what are your limits? What are some no-goes for you?
I started out going, I don't think I have any no-go limits.
Yeah.
However, I'm a very, very hygienic person. And what I will say is bodily fluids and things like that don't excite me. So there is
what type of bodily fluids exactly?
There is a safe place for this. And, golden showers, things that are particularly enjoyable for some people are not. For me, I definitely don't introduce that into play.
Golden showers, by the way, is when you pee on your partner. Just FYI. Go on.
Correct. So there's a lot of different things that, can still be practiced hygienically, but this is one of my limits.
Yeah.
Blood play,
Yeah. That's one of mine.
breath play. I haven't experimented with needles yet, but I wouldn't be against that because that's not necessarily blood play.
Yeah, because I've got little acupuncture needles that I use with one of my clients, and you don't bleed from little acupuncture needles. But yeah, blood play is definitely off the cards for me too.
Yeah, so they are currently my limits.
Yeah.
And I say currently because for me, it's all about education and knowing where you can go with certain things. And because I actually haven't practiced them, if I actually was interested in learning about them, I might actually enjoy them. But currently it's not. And I'm extremely hygienic. So that's my biggest one.
I love that. Are there any things that you now enjoy that used to be a limit?
Everything. So predicament bondage, I knew nothing about prior. So for me, I was very nervous in starting that, and electric play was something I really wanted to learn about. That started out being a hard limit was electric play because you can actually stop people's hearts and disrupt bodily.
This is coming from the dom who chased me around my own dungeon with an electric prod, because she's like, if you're doing this to people, you need to experience what it's like.
Absolutely. I did do that. I think that was pushing consent. However, I like to practice everything I do to a sub on myself within reason, obviously, because we have different genitalia.
Yeah.
But I like to practice on myself so that I understand if you're putting electronics on someone's nipples, you need to understand what that pain is about. So that there, even with different pain tolerances, you still have an idea of what you're subjecting someone to.
Yeah. So your limits have probably more been around if it's something you don't know enough about yet.
Absolutely. I practiced something for 6 months, literally 6 months in a relationship before I did it on my sub at the time, because it was something that literally needed to be very precise about what you do. Because it can cause permanent damage. So if you're going to be doing something that is on that edge, you need to understand it and you really need to practice it. So ropes was something I needed to learn. Predicament bondage was something I needed to learn. And electronics was something I needed to learn before I practiced.
Yeah. Have you ever practiced something and it's gone wrong?
Mostly on myself.
Yeah, on yourself, I mean. On yourself.
So with the electronics, the first rule when you read it is don't attach the opposite ends.
Oh.
So
because you got the
negative and positive.
Negative and positive ends, yeah.
So don't have them on opposite parts of your body because it can literally go straight through your heart. It's the first thing I did.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I went, wow, yep. I'm fine, obviously, because I didn't have it to the extreme, because you can turn these things up and down. So obviously I started low, but that was my first lesson.
I like that. My worst one was I had a barking dog collar. You know, it zaps the dog if they bark, because I had a sub who used to get a little bit too handsy, and so I decided that was going to be my method of consensual punishment, let me add. So I tested it as per I was instructed to do so, and I thought I started off on quite a low one, but no, it was very high and not pleasant.
Definitely around the neck.
Oh, this was only on my hand.
Good.
I tested it on my hand. I was like, so I wasn't going to put it on his neck. I actually put it on his leg instead, because I'm like, this is going to kill someone if they have it on their leg. So I feel sorry for dogs who bark out there now.
Yep, they have different types of skin and sweat glands that would affect this. But yes, point taken.
Yeah. Coming back to Dom High, that's obviously the ultimate thing for you, getting into that space. As you said, that kind of is what gets you off in the end. Are there situations where you haven't got there
if something has not gone, and it might be okay for the sub, he might not have an idea, but if I have planned something in my head to go a certain way, it's like anything. When you do something, you have a plan in your head, and you might have practiced that plan, but then if action time comes and you did it the wrong way, then that can definitely throw you because you've done something wrong, even though they might not know.
Yeah.
So for me, that will then get me into a bit of a head spin, which is silly because the sub is still enjoying themselves. It's then about establishing my mindset in order to get to that space. But I don't always have dom high because mine might end in sexual gratification later down the at the end of the night. But the highest dom high I have had is definitely when everything went to plan and the sub was just blown away because I was challenging them in all different ways, and they might have had multiple orgasms through no bodily stimulation. So all about the mind orgasm.
Sometimes I try and liken it to when you've like had a really good day at work, or you've had like a presentation and you just like killed it and everyone's really happy with you, and you kind of walk out of the office and you're just like floating on cloud nine. I'm like, it's kind of like that.
Absolutely. That's what it's like. I say absolutely a lot, I just realized. But it is that excitement and that high when you're like, I literally have jumped off the bed and gone, yes, like nailed it.
Definitely.
Because there is so much that can go, well, not necessarily wrong, but go different to how you have had planned. So their reactions, but when it goes 100% how you've had it planned, then
that's the
ultimate high. And that's my favorite thing.
I want to ask you, are you a fan of punishment or punishment? We've talked about this before, punishment being so when a sub does something that is, I had to use the word wrong, but outside of the scope of how you've negotiated one should behave in a scene, you give them a punishment, would be doing an activity to them that they have consented to, but they prefer not to do it, versus punishment, which would be, for example, someone's into corporal punishment, but you still spank them as naughty little pet or something like that, because that's an activity they enjoy. It's not actually a punishment. It's not actually deterring them from doing an unwanted behavior. So what's your preference?
My preference would be not to have to punish because I feel like if I've done everything correctly and the sub wants to please me, that they're not pushing the boundary within what we've set. So, but I always include in a contract the acceptable punishments.
Yes.
And that's a big part of what I can draw from. So for me, I like to give that as an assignment to my sub so they can actually write down what they consent to and what they feel is, different levels of punishment. And I actually do this in a fun way. So it can be a punishment because that is, one of the things they can then fold it up on. So each different paper would have a punishment. So, and they would go from levels from 1 to just a slap on the wrist to a level 5, which is then a more extreme punishment. They then write numbers on the back of them, and they then fold that piece of paper up and we put it in a bowl. So they've chosen their own punishments, and I would have a punishment for, a small crime, which would be labelled with a 1 on the back of that piece of paper. And if it's a naughty one where they've been really bad, it's a 5. So they're actually giving themselves their punishment. And I make them pick from it. So they pick it and they have to read it. But because they've actually assigned themselves those punishments, they're like, oh, crap. I gave myself. Why did I put that one in there? So I make it fun. So it is a punishment, but it's also something that they have consented to, but I make it fun in that way. But ultimately, the idea is to get through a session without punishments because I don't want to use them. And my biggest thing is they will be able to see the disappointment on my face. They'll be able to see me roll my eyes, and I will walk over to the bench and I'll be like, here you go. This is a level 3.
Yeah. It's interesting you saying my ideal is not to have to use punishments. It's funny because sometimes I feel if I don't use punishments in a session, I feel like I haven't done my job sometimes. I don't know why I've got that belief. I mean, there's people that really like the whole scene is based around punishments. Like they like being the, naughty schoolboy or, naughty patient or something where it's part of a play scene. But sometimes I think, oh, wait, I couldn't punish them. I didn't, maybe I needed a bit more punishment in there. But yeah, I think I like your idea of combining punishment and punishment. I think that's a really smart idea.
Well, it's enjoyment for me then because if you have to pick the punishments, then it's, even if you're trying to think of them, they will often go harder on themselves than you would go on them.
Yeah.
So having them put together their own punishments and then seeing their face when they're like, what mood was I in when I wrote that one?
Yeah.
It's quite exciting as well for me because it's like, well, you said it and now you're going to do it.
Yeah.
So, definitely I make punishments fun for me.
Yeah.
And, well, they get enjoyment too because they giggle at themselves because they're punishing themselves.
What's an example of a 1, something that's not too bad?
A 1 might just be writing lines.
Oh, okay, yeah, I've done that with someone there to write lines.
Yeah, so that's an example of a 1. 5 might be corporal punishment.
Yeah, giving them a good red bottom.
Yeah,
that's how I like to say it. So we've talked a lot about, you're putting in a lot of time and energy preparing these scenes. You might have scene 1 to 5 that's going over 5 hours. Do you ever get to like scene 1 or scene 2 and you just kind of like, actually, I'm taking this a different direction?
Yeah, you can always plan, but what you can't plan for is your sub's reaction to things.
Yeah.
So you might have in your mind, this is where I want the journey to go, but you may take a big detour.
Yeah.
And it could be because they're not enjoying it, but it could also be because something
is really going
well. And you want to then extend that, and then that might bring the end result, which I've spoken about as subspace. Yeah. So you might get to that, and that might be so intense that you just both can't go any further.
Yeah.
So you definitely need to make sure that you go with the flow and how it's happening and the excitement of what is working.
Yeah.
Or what is not working, and then you change it up. But I always like to prepare for different things, because if it isn't working, then it's like, okay, stop scene. We'll take a break.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to change it up to scene number 2, and it might only be 5 minutes in. But that doesn't matter, because I like to over prepare and have all different things. And I can honestly say that I would always prepare at least about 5 scenes, and most of the time I'd get to 3 or 4, and we've extended out so much that we're both exhausted and we stop at that scene, and that just then goes, okay, I'm going to use that scene that we didn't use as scene number 1 next time. So it also helps with my next lot of planning.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. I start, sessions with clients and we'll go through like things on the list, but, we don't always get through the list, but, often they say like, if we're vibing something and it's like taking over the scene, that's okay. Do you know what I mean? I don't think you have to go into a scene like with a checklist of like tick, 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 tick. Like, I think it's really important that you have to be able to like go with like what's vibing, what's flowing, what we're both feeling at the moment.
Yeah, for me, it's a little bit different, because I already have contract that basically gives me more flow with what I want to do. So I don't have to disclose everything I'm doing with every single session.
Yeah.
So I don't need a particular checklist, which means
yeah.
the only person that knows that we haven't got to scene 5 is me. So that's when I can keep it in my back pocket and be like, okay, well, I've pushed all their limits today and we've got to where we want to get to. Let's take a break early. Everybody might be tired. Everyone has jobs. So it's definitely something that you have to adjust with. And different things might not work. So they might not have pain tolerance that day, whereas previously they've had really strong pain tolerance. So
especially with women, if you're on your menstrual cycle, your pain tolerance is lower.
Exactly. So that's something that I would then go, okay, well, pain's not doing it for them today. So I'm going to just take away all those tools and we're going to focus on bondage.
Yeah. I think we've talked about some really great stuff today. I really liked, hearing how you prepare your scenes. It's very detailed. Definitely got some tips for myself, especially with the punishment balls. I really like that one. Just to end up on, I don't want people to think, it's so serious. These scenes where they're so serious, they're so pre-planned. As we said, you can go with the flow, you can go where you want with it. Laughing. It's a huge part of it. Am I not wrong in saying that?
I laugh all the time.
Yeah.
If
especially when it goes wrong.
I am not what I would call a serious or strict dom at all. I bring all my aspects of my different personalities into my whole persona as a dom, and that might be rolling my eyes, laughing at them. We laugh together, so they're allowed to laugh too if something goes wrong. So if a slippery butt plug falls out. Which is, so common. But it's good to laugh and then you have to run to the bathroom, clean it, continue. But it is really good to have that energizing relaxation version of that as well. So you've got to reset the scene, so you might as well enjoy it.
Yeah.
And 100% I laugh all the time. I roll my eyes. That every time they disappoint me, it's like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah.
So it is very relaxed, my sense of being a dom. That doesn't mean that I don't have my full subs attention and respect, because for me, respect is freely given and it is earned.
Yeah.
And that's, if you have to demand it, then you're not doing
your job right.
No. It should be something that's freely given. So they're not going to care if you've done something wrong, because in their minds you're still perfect.
Yeah. I love that some of the funniest times is when I'm actually trying to be all serious and I'm doing something and I'm in my serious dom phase, and then I just completely fumble it and we both just start rolling around the floor laughing. So I like that element to it. I actually think it's really nice that it, it's not as people imagine in their head, all serious and strict. There can be a really funny element to play. Yeah,
there's definitely sides of serious and strict, and different forms of play determine what my, what I bring, what side of my dom that I bring to that scene.
And even your mood probably for that day will influence it. Some days you're probably feeling like the funny side of you is coming more out, and some days it might be the stricter side.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming back and chatting with us. It's been a very eye-opening experience, I think, for all listeners today. We will be speaking to you again, I know. And for everyone else out there, stay kinky.